Okay, so I'm just going to jump into Visual Studio Code here and just show you some of the main landmarks of what you need to be looking for the tests. So down here at the bottom, you can see we have this Karma comp file.
Yep.
And I'm not going to open it up and step through it, but that's your config for your test runner. And then you've also got the protractor.conf.js file, which is for your end-to-end tests, which live up here in your E to E folder. And I'll get back to that later. But your unit tests, you actually write right there next to the actual file that you have.
Okay.
And in other things, like in C#, often you have a test folder.
Oh, for sure. Test project even.
Yeah, or a test project.
Yeah.
But in the JavaScript world, it's encouraged to have them right next to it for a couple of reasons. One is you can see if there actually is a test.
Yeah, true.
Because you open up and you go, well, there's no .spec file there, which is a test file.
Yeah. So
we'll use that one. And that's one of the, kind of the main reason is, and also to encourage people to look at it for documentation and other sorts of things. Okay. So most of the time you'll see your test right there. It doesn't mean it gets passed to the browser. You've got a build tool that strips it out, but it will be put there.
Yep.
And then down at the bottom here, I've got a Wallaby file and another Wallaby file set up in here to be able to run Wallaby, which is, I'm not going to run through the setup. There's a great, in the README here, if you come to the bottom, you can see I've got a bunch of useful links, and one of them is to the test repo, which Wallaby keeps up to date. So you just go in there, edit a couple of files, and follow the docs.
Yep.
It's not too bad. So once you've got all that set up, you can see in working application here, if I was to just go Command P and look for a spec folder, I've auto-generated all the tests as I make all my components, because that's what the Angular CLI does.
Oh, okay.
But then they're all broken immediately. And this is what I see in teams.
We just comment out the test and it'll pass.
Exactly. So that's what we've done. And that's where we're going to start from today. And this is where most teams, what most teams do.
Don't leave commented out tests in your code. It's terrible.
No, it is terrible. And I'll show you how to write a component without making a test. You can, well, you can just go ng, C for component, or G for generate, and C for component, and then -- spec false, and say, don't make me a test.
Okay.
Which is probably what your team should be doing by default if you're not going to write tests, rather than having 100 tests that are all commented out. Most people are in this situation. It's very hard to go 6 months into development with 100 tests commented out. It sounds crazy. But
let's do testing now.
Yeah, and then
testing should really be part of your workflow.
Yeah. One thing I don't mind is having all of those tests there, and they just do the dummy implementation, or the dependencies are set up, but all they do is test that the component will actually load. That's not so bad, because then it buys you time later to come back and write tests, or for some devs who do want to write tests but others don't. And then you've still got test coverage very cheaply, and it's not hard to add more later. Whereas if you've got lots of comment out tests, it just ends up in a pile and everyone goes too hard to delete and not tackle it.
Someone clean that up.
Yeah. So you can see here we've got a bunch of tests, but they've all been commented out. But it's very easy if I just get rid of everything here and push Command J to open up the terminal. I'm going to push Control Shift tilde to get a second terminal.
By the way, if you're not familiar with Visual Studio Code and shortcuts, you should see Duncan's hands and fingers. It's amazing. There's shortcuts for everything.
But that's what I love about Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio's keyboard shortcuts. It's very keyboard-centric.
Yep.
So down here, we can go ng to get a hold of the Angular CLI, and then we can do test. And that is going to execute Karma, which is going to build your application, and then go look for any files that end in .spec, .ts, and run them.
Gotcha.
So here we can see it's booting up in the terminal, and it's going to say executed 0 error, because we have no tests yet, because I've commented them all out.
Yep.
Now, I'm going to run a couple like this and just leave this here, but also I'm going to use Wallaby, which I can do a Command Shift plus, and then it shows me all the Wallaby commands that I want to get to. So there's a start and a jump to and all sorts of things. Most of the time I just start it. And don't do too many of the other things. And you can see down here at the bottom, it's kind of ticking away, showing me that it's running 0 of 0.
Because we have 0 tests.
Yeah. But we're about to get into writing some tests. So this is kind of the nuts and bolts of what you need to know about, where the files are if you need to edit them or do other things. There's pretty much not much you need to do except write tests, which is amazing. It's half a day to a day task to set all this up if you do it from scratch.
Yeah.
So they're the tools. That's kind of how you execute them. Let's jump into writing some tests.